Well, let's talk about this now with someone who, unlike us, probably has a vote. I assume she does have a vote as an American author and journalist. Lionel Shriver joins us. You'll know her, of course, best for her novel turned into a hit film, We Need to Talk About Kevin. Also spoke to her earlier in the year about her brilliant new novel, Mania, about, well, frankly, an awful lot of the reasons, I think, it's set in the future, effectively, but why a lot of people are turning to Trump. Lionel Shriver, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's always nice to talk to you, Julia.
Thank you very much. Now, I know you don't live in America anymore, but assuming you do still have a vote. Now, if I put that question to you, who do you want to win the US presidential election and why? What is your answer?
I'm on the record as having been in a state of paralysis over which presidency I dread the most. And it's funny that I was listening to a piece on YouTube by the Free Press. They have decided not to endorse any specific candidate, but they did do a poll of their personnel. And it went a third to Trump, a third to Harris, and a third to either people who are not voting or are voting for third parties, which is very much like not voting.
Yeah.
So that's fully a third of a group of people who are high information voters, as we call them,
yeah.
That heavily involved in the election, following every story, and apparently, therefore, completely put off and refusing to participate.
Yeah, that's quite telling.
I'm afraid that's me, and I'm not proud of it.
You're not going to vote?
I have not voted.
Yeah, I find this fascinating because I could absolutely understand why someone would say, you know, plague on both their houses, I'm not going to vote. But that is a cop-out, isn't it?
Oh, totally. And by the way, I should clarify that I'm registered to vote in New York, and New York's electoral votes are a foregone conclusion.
Right.
So it doesn't actually matter in terms of the result.
It's not going to be your vote that swings it for either candidate. No, that is a fair point. And in terms of the appeal, or obviously the lack of appeal of both candidates, what is it about Trump? What is it about Kamala Harris that you just simply can't bring yourself to vote for?
I think, that we're constantly throwing the accusation at Trump, especially Kamala Harris is doing, that he is so-called unfit to lead. But I think they're both unfit to lead. I agree that any candidate who has a history of refusing to accept the result of an election has disqualified himself for high office. But Kamala Harris is incompetent. I honestly think that he's right. She has a low IQ. She has no ability to function in front of the camera, which is part of the job of being president. And she is unquestionably a DEI pick. If it weren't for her race and sex, she would never be a candidate for the highest office in the United States. Yeah. And this is the aspect of the Democratic Party, which is now in the grip of its far left wing, that I most want to see defeated, because it's anti-meritocratic and it's ultimately racist and sexist to choose people to elevate because they simply represent the group they were born into. I think that way lies perdition. I mean, and that is exactly what has gripped the United States, because even in medicine and, dare I say it, air traffic control, we are starting to put people in positions of power and authority because of their race or sex. And this has got to stop.
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more on that. And that's the key issue, isn't it? I think they're both really just utterly unfit for public office, but for different reasons. But when it comes to policies, it is fascinating that policies are getting such little attention in this election. And I wonder if one of the reasons why that is because actually so much the mainstream media is so anti-Trump, and I understand that reason, but they're deifying Kamala Harris. I mean, the whole, the vibe thing, Brat Summer and all this abject nonsense that was talked about her. No one knew how to pronounce her name. Why? Because she was such an utterly unforgettable, incompetent non-entity as a vice president, just as she was as a candidate in 2020, which is why she didn't even make the first primary vote. But the key thing there is that if you actually look at the policies, there's no doubt at all that his policies are actually ones which have the support of the majority of Americans, not just majority of Republicans. Issues like the net zero, on the border control, some of, the madness on trans and things like that. He's actually, he other than on abortion, he's actually on the sort of the right side of history on that for American voters. But you'd think on that basis then, he would be running away with the election, and yet it's too close to call, according to the polls. Why do you think it is so close?
Because he personally puts people so off for, being crude, being poorly spoken, being insulting. And by the way, I try to avoid falling into the trap of going on and on about how horrible Trump is, because you get so sick of people on the left going into ecstasies over how horrible
well, they've been comparing him to Hitler. A rally at Madison Square Garden being described as, like a Nuremberg rally. I mean, this stuff is crazy.
It is, and I think it backfires, as Tom Slater was trying to explain, that a lot of the country does not like being crudely manipulated in that manner and implicitly insulted. Because, if you support a fascist, then obviously you're a fascist too. And I think the entire range of rhetoric in the United States has lost, the people using it have lost a grip. It's almost to the point where, if Trump is president, he's going to sell the United States to aliens. You run out of hyperbole at a certain point.
That certainly is the case. In terms of the talk about this being sort of an existential battle for democracy, and I completely agree with your views on, Donald Trump and his refusal to leave office and have the peaceful transfer of power, and claiming he still won that election, challenging, everything. He's welcome to challenge things in the courts, but the claims he made were outright, outlandish lies, and his refusal to. I don't believe he was actually responsible for people storming the Capitol in terms of the words he said at that rally just beforehand. But he absolutely, we know from people on his own side who were with him, he absolutely did nothing to stop it when it was within his power to do so. And I think that is appalling. That said, is there also an existential, battle ahead in terms of a win by Kamala Harris as well?
I think there's a great deal at stake if we put the country in the hands of someone who's not only incompetent, but also very far left. And it's credible that she doesn't actually have any real opinions. I mean, is the easiest answer to why it's been so graceful for her to just abandon every position she's ever made in public. But what that means, is that she's likely to be just a figurehead, and represent a group of people who have really been controlling the Biden White House in his dotage, and we don't know who they are. Yeah. So that's not democratic. Certainly, the way she was chosen was not democratic. She was imposed on the party and resurrected from being one of the most disliked and useless vice presidents we've ever had into, and then suddenly elevated into the second coming. I mean, as a character, and she is a Democratic Party invention. She has been created, and instantaneously, within hours of Biden's withdrawal from the race, we're supposed to consider her, a a source of joy.
Yeah, it was quite bizarre watching that. I'm thinking, are you all seeing and hearing what I'm seeing and hearing? Because this woman is clearly a fool. I mean, clearly a fake fool. Quite bizarre. What do you make of all the celebrity endorsements? You know, we had Taylor Swift coming out. I mean, people, the BBC, right? I mean, they lost their minds about this. This was it. You know, Oprah Winfrey, J-Lo, John Bon Jovi, you name it, lining up for the Democrats, for Kamala Harris. That said, we've had, you know, Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, massive big podcasts, so hugely influential figures on the right coming out for Donald Trump. Do you think that celebrities make any difference at all to these elections?
I'm not sure whether they actually do make any difference, but I do have strong feelings about whether they should, and they shouldn't. I mean, I don't see why some singer should influence what I want to do about the national debt. It just, I find the whole thing a farce. Kamala has been worse on that front than Trump. At least bringing Elon Musk on board, you are allying yourself with someone who's smart and has more, you know, has done more than record songs or, you know, has something to do with the way the world works. Whereas, you know, Harris has shamelessly touted out all these celebrities whose opinions shouldn't count any more than any other American citizens.
No, indeed. I also have kind of the view that if you're deciding to vote or who to vote for based on what Taylor Swift says, I'm not entirely sure we want you to have a vote. I'm all for democracy, but I'm not entirely sure that should be how it's decided. When it comes to, you know, we've got election day right now. We've obviously got 80 million people have already voted, even before this point, that early voting by ballot and in person. Likely to be similar numbers, possibly more, voting today. We may find out early hours UK time tomorrow who the winner is. We may not know for a few days, as it was in 2020. We may not know for a few weeks if there's lots of, it's very close and there's lots of legal challenges, as we did in 2020 when George W. Bush beat Al Gore. Do you think that we're going to find out relatively soon? And what are your fears if Donald Trump loses for civil unrest?
Well, of course, I have no way of knowing when we're going to get a result, and nobody else has any way of knowing whatever they tell you. So
yes, this is true.
And we're close enough to what actually happens that we don't really have to wonder anymore. We can just wait. Most people are not very good at waiting. So, yeah, as for how much there is a danger on the right about physical violence, I think that's what people are most worried about, since these people have a reputation for being well armed, although there are more Democrats with guns than you realize.
Yeah.
I honestly also have no idea, and most people have no idea.
But that's a concern, isn't it?
I think there is also some danger of violence on the left.
Well, yeah, we saw in 2020 Black Lives Matters. I mean, huge swathes of towns being damaged.
I mean, we've got January 6th on the one hand, but we also have 4 solid months of rioting and arson on the left after George Floyd's death in 2020. And I find that stuff pretty scary. And in terms of, you know, even January 6th was unarmed, whereas a lot of the people on the left did have guns, and they certainly had matches, and they did something like $2 billion worth of damage. So I think they're pretty well matched. That there are concerns
on both sides,
regardless of who wins. But I want to, before we stop, I want to make sure to return to a point that you raised and I didn't address. You said Donald Trump's actual positions on important issues like net zero or effectively open border align, or trans, align with the vast majority of Americans' opinions. And, you know, therefore, why is he not running away with this election? just want to express my exasperation as someone who, just because the left has moved so far left that I'm kind of left behind as apparently right of center now.
Yeah.
Any credible conservative candidate in this election, other than Donald Trump, would indeed be running away with it. This was from the beginning, because of all those unpopular positions, it was the Republican Party's to lose. They could have had a landslide, even if they had nominated someone like Ron DeSantis, who I concede is not especially charismatic, and but he'd still have run away with it. He would have run the states, and this is the source of extreme exasperation for people like me, and I'm talking about the vast majority of the United States. I'm not in a minority, who don't get representation now because of this freakish appearance of a once-in-a-lifetime candidate. And I wouldn't want to insult people who are fans of his. I can see his appeal. He is sometimes very funny, and that, of course, wins my heart. And he is at least sticking up for positions that are important, but he comes with so much baggage that he puts off that crucial middle independent voter who is determining this election.
Yeah.
And I think that if the result is Harris, well, it is still a tragedy. It is still a threat to democracy. And it is, most of all, we're electing somebody who does not represent the opinions of the electorate on all of those issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lionel Shriver, I wish I could talk to you for longer, but time's against us. American author and journalist Lionel Shriver, great to have your opinions on all of that. Tom Stage, just briefly, fascinating that Lionel said she hasn't voted. Basically, both candidates are too awful. She doesn't want to vote for them, but acknowledges the appeal, certainly, of Donald Trump. And again, I think that's where a lot of people are. It's why we've got so many people who, with these two very different candidates, are still undecided in America. No, absolutely. And that's something which has been the story of the past few elections. It's not necessarily even in 2016 that Donald Trump ran away with it, but he was certainly appealing to those people who the Democrats are so abandoned. So it just shows how much is left to play for still. Absolutely. Well, there we are.